What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be playing this brand new game that's very similar to Minecraft, but with new mechanics. While I explore this new world, I'll be reading some dramatic stories from Reddit. I literally love these kinds of stories. And to start things off, I'll be reading this story. I found out my boyfriend breaks up with me every time he gets angry. I'm 25 years old, and I've been in a relationship with my 27-year-old boyfriend for almost 2 years. When we first started dating, everything felt incredibly intense, in the best way possible. He was affectionate, attentive, and constantly said he had finally found someone who truly understood him. I felt chosen, safe, and, most importantly, part of something stable. I've never been the type to enter a relationship without thinking about the future, and he seemed to be on the exact same page. Or at least, that's what I believed. Our first argument started in a normal way, like in any relationship. Differences of opinion, small conflicts, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was something strange that I only realized much later. Whenever our fights became more intense, he would emotionally disappear. He wouldn't respond to messages for hours, sometimes even days, and when he finally came back, he acted as if the argument had been completely irrelevant. At first, I thought that was just how he dealt with conflict. Some people need space, right? I tried to respect that, even though it made me anxious. The problem is that this pattern kept repeating, and something inside me started to feel wrong. The truth came out in a completely unexpected way. We were sitting on the couch together, using his phone to pick a movie, when a notification popped up from a mutual friend. The message said something like, "Good thing you two got back together. I thought it was really over this time." I froze. I asked him what that was about, nervously laughing, hoping it was just a joke. He immediately looked uncomfortable, grabbed the phone from my hands too quickly, and said it was nothing. That alone made me push for an explanation. After a few minutes of awkward silence, he finally confessed. Every time we had a serious fight, he told his friends that we had broken up. It wasn't just a figure of speech. He genuinely presented himself as single. Sometimes he even changed his relationship status on social media. Other times, he would simply let people assume the relationship was over. And when things calmed down and we made up, he would take it back, as if nothing had happened. I asked him why. His answer was the part that hurt the most. He said he did it because he needed to feel in control of the situation, that when he was very angry or frustrated, the idea of ending things, even temporarily, made him feel powerful. According to him, he never cheated, never hooked up with anyone during those periods, and it was just his way of releasing emotions. But how was I supposed to trust that? While I spent nights crying, wondering if we would be okay, he was out there telling people he was single. While I was trying to fix things, he was testing the idea of not being with me anymore, even if only in words. What hurt me the most wasn't even the fear of cheating, but the constant feeling of instability. I realized that, for him, our relationship seemed to have an on and off switch, something that could be discarded temporarily whenever emotions became too intense. Since that conversation, I can't argue with him the same way anymore. Every disagreement now comes with a terrifying thought. Is this the time he's already telling everyone it's over? I feel exposed, disposable, and deeply insecure. He swears he'll never do it again. He says he understands now how toxic this behavior is and that he's willing to change. But the question that won't leave my mind is simple and painful. Am I in a real relationship, or just something he chooses when it's convenient? You are not wrong for feeling insecure. A healthy relationship should not function as a constant threat of abandonment or as a game of emotional power. When someone repeatedly breaks up during conflicts, even if only verbally, it creates an unstable environment that erodes trust and destroys emotional safety. If you choose to stay in this relationship, it's essential to have a clear, firm, and final conversation about boundaries. Not as a request, but as a necessity. Saying something like, "For me, breaking up, even as a joke or in the heat of the moment, is unacceptable. If it happens again, I will take it as a real breakup." Boundaries only work when they come with consequences. It's also important to reflect honestly. Are you staying because you truly believe he will change, or because you're afraid of losing what you've already built? Love should not be sustained by constant anxiety or the feeling that you're always one argument away from being discarded. If possible, seek support, therapy, trusted friends, or someone outside the situation who can help you see things more clearly. You deserve a relationship where conflict does not put your place in doubt. Emotional stability is not asking for too much. It's the bare minimum. My partner called me selfish for not wanting to share my inheritance. I'm 29 years old, and a few months ago, I lost my grandmother. She was the most constant person in my life. While my parents worked all day, she was the one who picked me up from school, who always asked how I was really doing, who taught me from a young age to save money because, as she used to say, the world isn't always kind to those who depend on others. Losing her was already painful enough, but along with the grief came something I wasn't expecting: an inheritance. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't anything that would dramatically change my lifestyle, but it was enough to pay off some debts, build an emergency fund, and, for the first time in a long while, breathe with a bit more security. When I told my partner, who was 32, he hugged me, said he was sorry about my grandmother, and told me he was glad I now had some financial support. For the first few days, everything seemed normal, until the comments started. At first, they were subtle. Now we can think about investing in something together. Then, maybe now we can finally put a down payment on an apartment. Always we. Always spoken as if that money already had a shared destination. I tried not to create conflict. I told him I was still processing everything and that I needed time. A few weeks later, I decided to be honest. I explained that my plan was to use part of the money to pay off old debts and save the rest. I told him that, for now, I wasn't comfortable mixing that money with couple plans. His mood changed instantly. He became quiet, distant, and over the next few days, noticeably cold. Then came the conversation that completely shook me. He told me he was disappointed in me, that I was being selfish, that if I truly cared about the future of our relationship, I would understand that the money should be used to build something together. When I said that the inheritance had nothing to do with love, he replied that I was thinking like a single person, and that this showed a lack of commitment. I felt awful, not just guilty, but deeply confused. I started questioning myself. Was I really being unfair? Was I betraying the idea of partnership by protecting something that came from my grandmother? At the same time, something inside me was screaming that this money wasn't a prize or an investment opportunity. It was the last act of care from someone who loved me deeply. Since then, the subject has become a constant shadow in our relationship. Every argument somehow circles back to it, directly or indirectly. And I've started to realize that this isn't just about money. It's about control, expectations, and my right to decide what's mine without being emotionally punished for it. Now I'm stuck between the fear of seeming selfish and the fear of giving up something that represents security, memory, and autonomy. You are not selfish for protecting something that came from such a significant loss. An inheritance isn't casual income. It's an emotional legacy and often a safety net. A healthy partner may have opinions, but must respect your boundaries and decisions, especially when it involves something that wasn't built together. Pay close attention. The real issue isn't the money, but how he reacts when you say no. Real love doesn't pressure, guilt, or turn self-protection into a moral failure. You have the right to feel secure without explaining yourself. I pretended to like my boyfriend's hobby for 3 years, and now I hate everything. I'm 28 years old, and I've been with my boyfriend, who's 30, for a little over 3 years. When we first met, one of the first things he made clear was how passionate he was about his hobby. It wasn't just a casual interest. It took up a big part of his free time, his conversations, his weekends, and even the way he defined himself as a person. At first, I actually found that beautiful. He talked about it with so much excitement, explained every detail with genuine enthusiasm, and I wanted to be part of that. So I started showing interest. I asked questions, went to events, watched related videos, and acted excited. In the beginning, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. I liked seeing him happy, and I believed that over time the hobby would naturally become something I enjoyed too. But that never happened. As the months passed, I realized I was only tolerating it. I wasn't truly excited. I didn't feel pleasure. I just kept participating because I had already created this image of the supportive girlfriend. When I tried to reduce my involvement, he was visibly disappointed. He'd say things like, "I thought this was something we shared," or "You used to enjoy it more." So I went back to pretending. 3 years passed like that. His hobby stopped being just one part of his life and became a constant expectation. He started assuming my presence, my enthusiasm, my active support. If I didn't react with excitement, he'd ask if I was upset with him. If I suggested doing something different, he seemed frustrated, as if I were rejecting an essential part of who he is. The truth is, I never rejected him. I just never liked the hobby. Lately, I've started feeling something that scares me. Resentment, not toward the hobby itself, but toward the position I put myself in. I'm angry at myself for not being honest from the beginning. At the same time, I'm terrified of telling the truth now and destroying the image he has of me. I'm afraid he'll think I lied all this time, or that I don't truly support him. The worst part is that this has started spilling into other areas of the relationship. Small things irritate me more than they should. Sometimes I catch myself avoiding conversations just so I don't have to hear about it. And I keep wondering if this discomfort is a sign of something bigger. Maybe I stopped being myself in order to fit better into his life. Now I feel stuck between two options that both seem terrible. Keep pretending and building more frustration, or finally be honest and deal with the consequences of a truth that took 3 years to come out. Being honest now doesn't erase the care you showed by trying to step into his world, but continuing to pretend will only deepen the resentment. Loving someone doesn't mean loving everything they love. A healthy relationship allows differences without emotional punishment. Talk calmly, without blame, and focus on how you feel now, not on what you should have felt before. If he can only love a curated version of you, the problem isn't late honesty, it's the lack of space for who you truly are. My friend uses therapy to justify every toxic behavior. I'm 31 years old, and this friendship has existed for over a decade. We grew up together. We went through hard phases, breakups, career changes, and family losses side by side. I always considered her one of the most important people in my life. That's why, when she decided to start therapy about a year ago, I was genuinely happy for her. I knew she carried a lot of old pain, and I thought it was a brave step. At first, it really did seem to help. She talked about self-awareness, boundaries, emotional triggers. I listened with attention and pride, but little by little, something started to change, and not in a good way. The first situations were subtle. She began canceling plans at the last minute, without warning, and when I expressed frustration, the response came quickly. My therapist said I need to respect my limits. Then came moments where she spoke aggressively to me or to other people, and any attempt at conversation was shut down with, "That's my trauma speaking." Over time, I noticed a pattern. Everything started being explained by therapy. If she yelled, it was because she was emotionally dysregulated. If she hurt someone, it was because she was in a process. If someone felt offended, the problem was that they didn't understand mental health. The moment that affected me the most happened a few months ago. I was going through a difficult time and asked to meet her so I could talk. She arrived late, spent half the time on her phone, and left early saying she was emotionally overwhelmed. When I told her I felt hurt, she replied that I was invading her space and invalidating her therapy. That hurt deeply. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells. Any discomfort I expressed was treated as a lack of empathy for her healing journey. Any boundary I tried to set was seen as an attack. The friendship, which once felt mutual, became a space where only her feelings, her needs, and her justifications existed. What made it even more confusing was that whenever I tried to pull away, she would say that I was one of the few people who still accepted who she really was. That trapped me between guilt and exhaustion. I wanted to be supportive, but I didn't want to keep being hurt in the name of someone else's healing. Now, I honestly don't know where her therapeutic process ends and where behavior that simply hurts others begins. And I keep asking myself if I'm being insensitive, or if I'm just finally tired of being the only one who understands. Therapy is meant to help someone take more responsibility for their actions, not to serve as a shield for hurting others without consequences. You're not wrong for feeling drained or for wanting clear boundaries. Supporting someone doesn't mean erasing yourself. A healthy friendship allows difficult conversations without turning every discomfort into an attack. If there's no space for your emotions, that space may no longer be safe for you. Protecting your emotional health is valid, even if it means stepping back from someone you love. My boyfriend is only affectionate when he thinks he's about to lose me. I'm 27 years old, and I've been with my boyfriend for a little over 4 years. When we first met, he was attentive, present, and made an effort to show affection. It wasn't over the top, but it made me feel desired and secure. Over time, that slowly changed, so gradually that it took me a while to really notice it. In everyday life, he became distant. He stopped complimenting me, rarely showed physical affection, and didn't ask about my day with genuine interest. I started feeling like I was constantly asking for emotional crumbs. When I told him I missed more affection, he'd say that was just the way he was, that love didn't need to be proven all the time. I tried to adapt. I convinced myself that maybe I was asking for too much. But then something strange started happening. Every time I became quieter, more distant, or mentioned that I was tired of the relationship, he would completely change. Suddenly there were long messages, promises, invitations, unexpected flowers. He became the person I had fallen in love with again. At first, that gave me hope. I thought, he still cares. He just needs a wake-up call. But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. As soon as I felt reassured and emotionally invested again, he went back to being cold. It was as if his affection had one very specific trigger, the fear of losing me. That realization affected me deeply. I noticed I was slipping into an unconscious game. Without meaning to, I was learning that in order to be loved, I had to pull away first. That to receive attention, I had to threaten to leave. And that left me exhausted. Now I feel confused about what's real. Does he truly love me, or does he just love the security of not being alone? Is the affection that shows up during crises genuine, or just a strategy to avoid abandonment? I still care about him, but I don't know if I can stay in a relationship where affection only appears as a reaction to risk, never as a daily choice. Consistent love shouldn't depend on the fear of losing someone in order to exist. When affection only appears during crises, it creates a draining cycle that confuses love with anxiety. You deserve steady presence, not emergency versions of affection. Pay less attention to promises and more to patterns. Have a clear conversation about what you need on a daily basis, not only when you're ready to walk away. And remember, if you have to distance yourself to be valued, the bond may be driven more by fear than by genuine care. I've found out my partner complains about me to strangers online. It started in the most ordinary way. We were sitting on the couch, exhausted after a long day, and I asked to use his phone to order food because mine was out of battery. He's always been relaxed about that. We've never had issues with passwords or privacy. That's exactly why I wasn't expecting to find anything unusual. While I was choosing a restaurant, a notification popped up at the top of the screen. It wasn't from anyone I recognized. The message was short, but enough to catch my attention. You're not wrong. She does seem very cold. My stomach dropped. Before I could stop myself, I tapped on the notification. It led to an anonymous forum, and there it was, laid out in front of me, a post describing our relationship, or rather, his version of our relationship. Every detail was far too familiar to be a coincidence. How long we'd been together, recent arguments, even phrases I remembered saying. I kept reading, my heart racing. He described me as distant, ungrateful, difficult to deal with. He said he did everything for me and that it was never enough. What hurt the most wasn't even the criticism, it was the tone. He portrayed himself as someone who was just trying to love, while I was the constant problem. In the comments, people who had never met me judged my character, gave advice, and suggested he should break up with me. And he replied, he agreed, he thanked them. Sometimes he even added more examples to reinforce how misunderstood he was. When I confronted him, he became defensive. He said he needed to vent, that he didn't want to talk to friends because he didn't want to expose me. That writing anonymously was the only way he could organize his thoughts. According to him, it didn't mean he felt that way all the time, but how could it not mean something? From that day on, something broke inside me. I started feeling watched, as if any disagreement we had could turn into content for strangers to judge. I began choosing my words carefully, afraid of becoming the villain in a future post. What should have been a safe space turned into a stage. What hurts the most is realizing that he never tried to talk to me the way he talked to strangers online. He never gave me the chance to explain my side before turning me into a character in a one-sided story. Now, I wonder if it's possible to rebuild trust when you discover that the person who says they love you is creating a narrative about you, without you, to be validated by people who don't even know you. Venting is human, but when it happens at the cost of your image and without any prior dialogue, it stops being healthy. You have every right to feel emotionally betrayed. A secure relationship requires conflicts to be discussed between two people, not judged by an invisible audience. Pay attention to whether he's willing to take responsibility and change this behavior, not just justify it. If you feel the need to police yourself to avoid becoming the villain in his version of the story, the issue may not be your coldness, but a lack of emotional loyalty in the relationship. My family says I changed since I started making good money. For most of my life, money meant extreme caution. Every expense was carefully planned, every decision had to fit the budget. I grew up hearing things like, "That's not for people like us," and "Those who grow up with little can't afford luxuries." I don't say this with resentment. My parents did the best they could. Still, from a young age, I promised myself I wanted a calmer, more stable life. I studied hard, worked while I was in college, and turned down invitations, trips, and rest so I could focus on building something solid. When I finally landed a well-paying job, it wasn't luck. It was exhaustion, persistence, and many nights of very little sleep. At first, my family seemed proud. Comments like, "You made it?" and "We always knew you'd go far," were common, but that didn't last long. Gradually, the tone changed. If I bought something nicer, they said I was getting full of myself. If I traveled, they asked if I didn't think it was excessive. If I politely refused to lend money, I was called cold. Everything started being seen as either showing off or selfishness. What hurts the most is that no matter what I do, it feels like I'm wrong. If I help financially, it becomes an obligation. If I don't, it's ingratitude. If I set boundaries, they say, "Money went to your head." If I try to explain myself, they say I've forgotten where I came from. I've even heard that I've changed too much, and that the old version of me was better. That made me question whether growing and improving my life automatically means shrinking myself so others don't feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like I'm only accepted if I keep playing the role of someone who's always struggling, even when I no longer have to. Today, I live with constant guilt. Guilt for having comfort. Guilt for saying no. Guilt for not being able to carry everyone with me. I love my family, but I'm tired of feeling like I need to apologize for having achieved something. Growth isn't abandoning your roots. It's honoring the effort that brought you here. You don't need to make yourself smaller to keep others comfortable. Financial boundaries aren't rejection, they're protection. Notice who can celebrate your achievements without turning them into obligations. Family love shouldn't come wrapped in constant guilt. It's possible to love, help when you choose, and still preserve your autonomy. Growth can unsettle those attached to your old version, and that isn't your fault. My boyfriend said I should be grateful he chose me. The sentence came out during a stupid argument, the kind that starts small and escalates quickly. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't said with obvious anger. It was spoken in an almost calm tone, which somehow made it even worse. "You should be grateful I'm with you. A lot of men wouldn't be." In the moment, I laughed nervously. I thought maybe I had misunderstood, or that it was just something said in the heat of the moment. But the sentence stayed with me. It echoed in my head over the following days, popping up at random times, always bringing the same feeling, a tightness in my chest, and the sense that something was very wrong. Looking back, the relationship already had strange signs before that. He often made subtle comments about other women, always comparing. He said I was different from most, but never explained whether that was a compliment or a warning. Sometimes he complimented my appearance like he was evaluating a product. "For someone like you actually look pretty good." I brushed it off. I told myself it was my insecurity, that I was being too sensitive. But after that sentence, I started revisiting past situations with new eyes. I realized he often positioned himself as someone doing me a favor by being with me, as if I were always in his debt. When I disagreed with him, he said I was lucky. He was so patient. When I talked about my personal goals, he questioned whether that wasn't too much ambition for someone in my position. Slowly, I started shrinking myself to avoid conflict, wanting less, saying less, feeling less. The most frightening part was realizing how much this affected my self-esteem. I began wondering if I was actually hard to love, if he was with me despite who I was, not because of it, if I constantly needed to prove that I deserved to be there. When I confronted him about the comment, he said I was overreacting, that he only meant the dating world is tough, and that I should value what we have. But he never truly apologized. He never showed that he understood why it hurt me. Now I feel stuck between two fears. The fear of leaving and, in his mind, confirming that I wasn't worth the effort, and the fear of staying and slowly believing that love is something I should be grateful to receive. No one should feel grateful for being chosen in a healthy relationship. Love isn't a favor, a prize, or a concession. When someone suggests they're making a sacrifice by being with you, it erodes your self-worth and creates a dangerous power imbalance. Pay attention to whether he values who you are, or the control he holds. You don't need to prove you deserve love. You already do. If a relationship makes you doubt your value, the problem may not be you, but the place where you're trying to be loved. My coworker copies everything I do, and no one sees a problem. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. The workplace is small. People influence each other. It happens, I told myself. But over time, it became impossible to ignore. The first moment that truly bothered me was when I showed up with a new haircut, and the following week, she appeared with something almost identical. I laughed politely and let it go. Then came the clothes. Very specific outfits, the same accessories, even the same makeup style. I tried not to care, but the uncomfortable feeling kept growing. It stopped being about appearance when it started affecting my work directly. In meetings, I would share an idea, sometimes still rough, not fully developed. Days later, she would present the same idea to management, slightly reworded, as if she had come up with it on her own. When I mentioned that we had already discussed it, she would smile and say, "Great minds think alike." No one seemed to find it strange. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe it was insecurity. But the pattern continued. Phrases I used became phrases she used. The way I carried myself was mirrored. Even personal comments I had made in private conversations started coming out of her mouth in professional settings. What bothered me the most was other people's reactions. When I tried talking to coworkers I trusted, I heard things like, "You're just being jealous," or "Take it as a compliment." But it didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like erasure. As if, little by little, my identity was being diluted into something collective, and I was the only one uncomfortable with it. I eventually spoke to her directly, calmly. I told her I felt uneasy about some of the similarities. She laughed and said I was being too competitive, that a professional environment isn't a place for ego. I walked away from that conversation feeling petty and paranoid. Now I work with the constant feeling of being watched and replicated. I avoid sharing ideas too early. I speak less in meetings. I close myself off, not because I want to, but because I'm tired of seeing everything I build be appropriated without recognition. And the most frustrating part is this. When no one else sees the problem, you start wondering if it really exists. You're not wrong for feeling uncomfortable when your work and identity seem to be constantly appropriated. Not all repetition is admiration. Trust your discomfort. Document your ideas, record your contributions, and look for clear ways to position yourself professionally without shrinking. If the environment dismisses your experience, seek allies or formal support. Your value doesn't decrease because someone copies you, but you don't have to stay silent to keep the peace. Protecting your voice is also an act of self-respect. I'm afraid to break up because he has no one else. I never thought I would stay in a relationship out of fear, but that's exactly how I ended up here. In the beginning, everything felt normal. He was attentive, affectionate, and often told me how important I was in his life. It sounded romantic. I felt needed, special, irreplaceable. Over time, I started to realize that I wasn't just important. I was everything. He didn't maintain friendships. Little by little, he drifted away from the few people he still talked to. There was always a reason. Someone disappointed him, someone didn't understand him, someone was unfair. His family became distant too. Old arguments, unresolved resentment, closed doors. When I asked if he didn't miss them, he said he didn't need anyone else because he had me. At first, that boosted my ego. Then it started to feel heavy. Any plan I made without him triggered anxiety. If I went out with friends, he became unusually quiet. If I mentioned traveling alone, he said he would feel abandoned. He never explicitly stopped me, but he always made it clear how much he would suffer if I went. Slowly, I began changing my choices to avoid that suffering. I canceled plans, reduced social time, and became the center of his life, and that suffocated me. I felt like I was carrying a responsibility I never asked for. The idea of breaking up started to surface, but it came with a paralyzing fear. He often said I was the only good thing he had, that without me, everything would fall apart, that I saved him. Each of those statements felt like an invisible chain keeping me there. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about guilt. I keep asking myself, if I leave, what happens to him? Will he fall apart? Will I be responsible for something irreversible? At the same time, I feel like I'm disappearing inside a relationship where simply existing has become a burden. Staying hurts. Thinking about leaving hurts even more. And I'm stuck in this limbo, trying to understand whether love is really supposed to feel like this. You are not responsible for being someone else's entire world. Healthy love adds to life. It doesn't replace every other connection. When staying is driven by fear and guilt, something is deeply unbalanced. Encouraging him to build a support system matters, but you can't sacrifice your own emotional health to hold someone together. Staying out of responsibility isn't a free choice. You deserve a relationship where staying is a desire, not a silent obligation. Caring for yourself is an act of courage, not abandonment.